Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reconnections Podcast, the show that reconnects entrepreneurship, art, and spirituality. I am Dunya Zelu, and I support human and organizational conscious transformations that contribute to the emergence of a more sustainable and happy world. The intention of Reconnections Podcast is to empower the new generation of changemakers, entrepreneurs, artists, and healers to find the right place through the opening of new flows between entrepreneurship, art, and spirituality. In that perspective, I am honored to interview every Friday an extraordinary guest for a multidimensional talk about reconnecting to self, to the others, and to nature. Thanks for joining us and happy listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Reconnections Podcast. Being at a crossroads between different cultures might raise questioning about one's identity, the right place to be, and the sense of belonging. We are all immigrants. That's the name of our episode today, and to discuss this topic, I am happy to receive Mishka KAPADIA. Mishka is a holistic lifestyle coach, author, and speaker that helps high-achieving men and women, especially of the expat population, in their journey as globetrotters. She has lived in metropolitan cities like Dubai and Chicago and currently resides by the countrysides in Ontario, Canada. As an immigrant herself, she understands what it takes to reconcile one's past with their present and design a desirable balanced future as it comes from her own life's blueprint. Mishka is a yogi, nature enthusiast, and a self-proclaimed foodie. Mishka, thanks for being here with us today and discuss this topic about immigration and identity. To start this episode, what does it mean for you to be an immigrant?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm so deeply honored, truly, that you chose to bring this conversation alongside with me and my metamorphic practices to have this deeper conversation around what immigration is and how it's perceived, as well as the things that we as individuals go through. This is where I link it a lot into the trauma conversations. Like, we don't even register a lot of the trauma that does come in. So to answer your question on what is immigration to me, we as human beings are just, we're a part of this bigger ecosystem of animals, and we may consider ourselves the top dog. We've taken the charge, the reins in our hands, but we've been free flowing the lands for as long as history can take us, till we can track throughout history how we have moved. So has our genetics, so has our experiences. And so collectively, I feel like we've gathered emotions, we've gathered a sense of belonging, but with every sense of identity, there is an opposite. So where there's a sense of belonging, there is a sense of not belonging. Where there's a sense of home, there's a sense of not being at home. There is a sense of a group identity of being together, the same tribe. And so there is the identity of not belonging in a tribe, in a country, it could be a small community as well. So when I say that we're all immigrants, I even kind of want to have people expand the idea, like when we're moving from one city to another city on these virtual lines that we've created as border lines, right? It is no different than having the country borderlines or the continent borderlines. These are all made by us. And if we really start understanding and having compassion for each other, I think we all are doing the everyday mundane, right? Of like waking up, wondering what our schedule entails, watching our children, our partners, our jobs, what are we going to eat today? So, just the simple mundane things in life. That's what everybody's journey is about. And then we get tied into all of these silly things as immigration and really taking a step back and saying, we all belong. Nobody is an outsider. We're all on this planet as humans together journeying the sun. How simple is that?
Very simple. I totally agree. I totally agree with you. As you know, I have this globetrotter feature as well. And what she's telling makes me think about our tendency as human being, as being, in this kind of duality, as you mentioned, belonging, meaning that we don't belong. And of course, when we see the thing in this dual view, there's still something to lack.
Mm.
How, according to you, people who are across those different cultures or living in different countries might actually get out of this duality to feel the unity as human being across those cultures?
Yeah, wonderful point of like living in duality. How true is that in our daily lives, right? Like 1 minute you're hungry, 1 minute you're not hungry, 1 minute you're happy, 1 minute you're angry. So you're living in an absolute duality all the times. Like it could be your work, it could be your home, it could be your relationships. We're constantly in duality. And so I think really I've been exploring the idea of not putting tags. And I know that's being really honed down even in the psychological field of like tagging people as ADHD, tagging them as, autistic. And while these are great to be able to collect data, it is great to be able to have an understanding on a general everyday basis. Human beings seem to love saying, you're American, you're Canadian, you're British, you're Australian, you're Pakistani, you're an Arab. Like all of these identities are irrelevant identities. And while they are so necessary for, I guess, data keeping, if they deem important, right? I can see it from, like, I don't want to be completely oblivious to the fact that we live in countries where there is an economy to run. You have to collect data. So let's get real that these are things that countries, civilization as we know it today requires data. And so I think on an everyday basis, actually injecting the idea of taking away the labels, having an understanding, but taking away the labels and broadening your perspective with a connection. Like you and I have connected, just, crossing paths, having similar insights. But I think what really brings people together is we are desiring connection. Human beings are constantly desiring connection. And so what is the valuable lesson we're learning? So anytime there is a separation, how easy would it be to step in and just explore why is it that it's bothering me? Actually, I have a quote here that I just came across yesterday, and it's so relevant. So I'm just going to share that with you. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves.
I love it.
Right. So while we're talking about duality and connection, and so how quickly can we connect the minute, we're able to see why is it that is bothering me about this person? You step in and look and explore, immediately the world opens up like a seed breaking through. And that is what these up-leveling opportunities are all about. Breaking through, breaking free from our own perceived identities and what we think others' identities are.
And in your own journey, you have Pakistani roots.
Mm-hmm.
You were born and raised in Dubai, you lived in Chicago, you live now in Canada. What challenges have you been facing through your globetrotter journey?
Yeah. I think there were so many valuable lessons and identity grabs that went through this process. As somebody that was born with an identity of another in a country that wouldn't extend citizenships to people even born there. That was just the story with Dubai. We I definitely felt like that was home. That's where we had been established. My parents and I lived there for 17 years of our lives. However, whenever we went back to Pakistan, it was just an instant connect with the family that was there. So they sucked me into the identity of belonging. You do belong here. However, when I would visit Pakistan, I would definitely feel like the other as well, because I wasn't born there. And the experiences that they were having were not my experiences. So while living in Dubai, I'm feeling like another. I'm also feeling like another in my own home country of belonging. So that was an interesting scope lens that I observed as I transitioned into our next chapter, which was in Chicago. And we had immigrated when I was about 17. My family has three girls. And so it was on heightened alert that, we want to make sure that they integrate and they still belong here. However, they don't forget their roots and staying connected with the people there. So what happens in a situation when you're holding on to the reins of the past and you're still wanting to move on to the future, you're kind of stuck in between, not moving forward or backwards. So that was one of the things I do remember experiencing, perhaps not in the immediate, but as I transitioned into workspaces and you feel like, okay, you do belong here now. This is your new home. You're building a new identity, but you're not just willing to let go of the identities of the past. And that comes from a lot of like collective pressure as well, be it your relatives, be it your parents, the societies that you and the communities that you've belonged to in the yesteryears. And then came this new chapter of moving into Canada. And my husband and I had gotten married and moved to Canada. We had beautiful moments of like the firsts, you buying your first home, your first child's born here. So now we're making this home. And as we're making this home, we're starting that exact same cycle of, okay, we do belong in the States because our families live there. Both our families live there. And that's where my husband and I connected, became a partnership that is creating this new home for our future generations. So what I really learned from that cycle is how that cycle even can become your identity of connecting and disconnecting continuously. And so I also want to bring into the mix how similar is that when you are moving from one city to another. So just simple things like connecting your children to a new school, to a new library, connecting yourself to new friends, a new space that you're going to work out. These are very micro things that happen in our lives. But on the more macro scale, what's happening is an identity shift. And for me, the biggest message that all of these experiences brought was I already belong. We already belong. There is that struggle, that sense of tug and pull is really something that we have created. And again, with the labels, right? Like you belong to Pakistan, you belong to Dubai. I just belong to planet Earth. And if we have that, right, how easy does it make our life to be able to focus our complete attention on, okay, I already belong. There is no reason to get confused over these identities. And then you can really hone down on what your purpose is. What are you really here to do? With the things that you have learned, now what are you really here to do? So Yeah, that's kind of also what I do even in my coaching. Is it's been it's been an interesting thing because when I set out with coaching, I thought it was going to be more on the beauty front because I own a beauty studio. Then I thought also that my clients would be predominantly women. But a lot of that started to fall off. And when I started to have conversations around collective and individual, not just evolution, but transformation and what that looks like, that's connected somehow with people on the expat immigrant front is, oh, we all have that story in our background, be it our parents, be it us, be it our grandparents. And the more you know about it, the more you're able to heal the generational traumas that have been set in. And I think that's the deeper work. Once you're aware of those things, you're able to let go of identities that don't serve you.
Hey, I guess it's really interesting to deep dive what we hold in terms of collective consciousness of memories about the identity, especially as we've shifted in a more globalized way of living, which means that changing the country, the city where you live, changing culture is something that becomes more normal today. And the identity questioning that many people go through, and especially I think being in peace with the fact to belong to planet Earth and to different cultures, and at the same time to be geographically present at a moment in another place, another area of the Earth, I would say.
Space, right? Another space.
It is. You talked about connecting, disconnecting.
Mm.
We are in Reconnection podcast to add another way to connect. And I like to ask you, my inviters, a question regarding your own story. And if you had a reconnection moment that was very impactful in your life, what will it be?
Mm. So for me, it was a knock on my door for my health. And when you think about health, you think about, oh, what's your food like? What's your movement like? Those are the things that come up, right? Like you go to a fitness coach, you go to a naturopath. These are some of the things like, what are you doing nutritionally? But truly, what that knock on my door was about, are you connecting with yourself? Are you honoring yourself and honoring the new space that you've created for yourself? So, what that looked like, I'll share what that looked like. It came to me in the form of conditions that represented like asthma. So there's a suffocation, right? And then it came in as weight gain, perhaps like just imbalances, a lot of allergies. And I would laughingly say things like, oh, I'm allergic to everything on this planet. I don't even belong here. Right? Now the things that I know, and it's like ding, 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 ding. I was voicing the identity of not belonging. And so my body was registering, you don't belong here. You just don't belong. You don't belong on planet Earth. You don't belong in your new surroundings. That is something that I am declaring for myself on an everyday basis. And so at that point, I'm just kind of being my playful self and being explorative on the food front. And what was really interesting to me was I was at a retreat and we were about 40, 45 people in this room, a massive circle. And there was a psychotherapist that was like literally going through the room, bang, 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 you're going to be healed. You're going to be healed. You know, you're just deep diving in, but in a matter of seconds, he's breaking through the crap you're telling yourself. And one of the things that just came out, I had come from another session and just joined in, and he's like, and you? He just pointed at me and I wasn't prepared. And those are the best times when you're not ready and you're just caught off guard. You have no way to get fancy and lying about yourself, like the truths that you don't want to accept. And he said, and so what is it that you're here for? And I'm like, oh, I am such a foodie. I love being, we were a family of foodies, and that's my identity, one of my identities I recognize. And immediately he looked at me and he's like, so are you a foodie, or are you here to drop that identity and actually explore the connections? And something about the way this wise old man with a white beard, I swear he seemed like a wizard in that moment to me. The way he had just said that in that moment connected so deep with me. And I started just blurting out things like, yeah, this is such a deep rooted connection to my family that I left behind in Dubai, the family that I left in Chicago. And it just started coming out. And that's the beauty of these deep dive questions. When somebody else asks you, you have no space to lie. You can tell yourself the lies that you want to, but when somebody else that is skilled in the art that they are working with you, they cut through the facade. And that for me was a wake up call. And I recognized that I was actually using food as a way to connect and disconnect. Connect when I was desiring connection and couldn't get it because of time zones or just distance, and disconnect when I didn't want to deal with my emotions. So that is another area that I really work on. Is it is not your relationship with food, really. It all comes down to the relationship with yourself. And how comfortable are you with that identity, whatever identity you're wearing. So to me, these identities are like little suits, like be a space suit, or, if you kind of really get down to being that inner child that you truly want to honor on an everyday basis. Kids do that all the time. They'll go play dress up. They're an astronaut one day. They are a princess the other day. They could be a knight in shining armor, and we as adults have just really, I think we get rigid and get stuck on like, no, this is the suit I'm wearing and I cannot wear another suit. And the truth is you can. Today you can be this and tomorrow you could be that. And that's okay. Nobody's judging. And the ones that are judging don't matter because they're not part of your journey.
That's the point. I totally agree with you. And at the same time, being an immigrant, a globetrotter, might be challenging. And being in this position, we might struggle a bit more to find our identity, being across, as you mentioned, different identity as who we are belonging to. And at the same time, I really do believe that it gives strengths and a certain openness also in your journey, and maybe also the example you have with the clients you work with. What are the strengths that you get by being a globetrotter, by being an immigrant across different cultures?
I think amongst the top three would be they are able to see where they fit in and can contribute, because that's the desire. The desire is connection. And so the effort made by somebody that is connecting to an already pre-existing society is the desire to connect. And so why that is a movement rather than just a quality is because not only are they hopping on and connecting to an already established state, most people that do come in, they're either coming in with money, resources, the desire, even like there's a huge upset over refugees and stuff. And I have this conversation as well that they're bringing their strengths along. So just imagine if there was a fire in your home, you're grabbing the suitcase, you have 5 things you can grab. they're bringing those 5 things and they're wanting to make sure that they bring it to their new homeland and connect. And so that desire to connect is so much more higher, that you can be so much more impactful. You can be so much more purposeful. You don't take things for granted when you've been to the dark side. And that's sort of a dark side. It doesn't have to be like depressive. I mean, for some it is, because you're leaving so many identities behind, so much behind, and you're moving forward. Just in regular immigration, forget in a situation where it's crisis as a refugee. So imagine the desire to connect. So I think that value is such a primitive value that I guess we forget when we're pre-established for generations in the same place. That value dissipates because it's like, well, you got to accept me for who I am because I live here. I was born here, so, and people know you, people have known your parents. So there is no immense need to make a statement. And that's, I think, one of the things that really is a strength that people bring in. The other strength, I think, is bringing together cultures that bring flavor. And that doesn't mean that it takes away from the culture that is already prevalent. It is just adding, like, I don't know if you remember the story of the stone soup. Growing up, there was this story of there's this gypsy sort of guy that's passing through a village and he is starving and he is trying to figure out a way to get some food. He doesn't have any money. And then, he stands in the middle of the marketplace and starts yelling like, delicious stone soup. It's a new thing and everybody get in on it. Like, you should try this. And nobody that's passing by can see any soup. So they start asking, well, where's the soup? I don't see what you're promoting here, right? And he goes, oh yeah, so it is happening. You just need to get a pot. And so it is a collaborative thing. And everybody's like, oh, we all get to pitch in. He's like, yeah. And it becomes this most delicious soup. Somebody brings in the pan. Somebody brings in, he has the stones in his hand and he's like, this is how we're going to make it. And he literally sells the idea of everybody bringing in carrots and cabbage and onions. So everybody's pitching in. And now he's got a fire, he's got a pot, he's got his stones, which were, not going to add anything to the soup, but everybody pitched in and they all collectively enjoyed this soup. And in the end, everybody's like, this was the best soup. They completely forgot what they had contributed, but what they had collectively made was what was so much more important. And so kind of taking value from that folk tale, I guess, is the fact that together, if we put our brains together, the things that we can collectively create are absolutely immense out of nothing. But even if these people that were in the village would have kind of dissed him because he was from the outside, he did not belong, they wouldn't have shared this collective experience. So bringing those flavors in is what we rely on in a society. And we're so stuck in the black and white. And believe me, I was there. I was there because that was a training model, that everything is black and white, right or wrong. And that's how you live your life, versus the shades in between. And that kind of encourages acceptance. The color expands on acceptance. And I think that's a huge value, to be able to, I say color, but color is not just the skin color. It's really the flavors that we have internally, right? That's what I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear on that. It's skin deep. It has nothing to do with the shades in between. It has truly to do with what you're bringing in from the inner out. And for my third would be that I feel like the children of immigrants, even without knowing, carry this responsibility. They shoulder the responsibility of almost like a USB cable, it's connected on both sides, right?
I love the image, the metaphor. Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
So they're being charged by their lineage, their ancestral sense of belonging, but they're also co creating with people that already have been in a space for perhaps a few generations. And I really want to honor that because it is forgotten. Because it is forgotten because it just is like, oh, were you born here? And the minute the child or even an adult who has been a first generation immigrant will say yes, it's like, oh, you're one of us. And even that kind of presents a slight complication, or what I would like to say is it's an opportunity for awareness. Is that child, the inner child of even that adult, is still in the process of creation and connection, because it's still connected to the past and shoulders the responsibility of being part of an old paradigm and a new paradigm. And in that shift, they're still working on the creation of their new identity. So I mean, this is getting a little deep and heavy. However, that's where I love to go. And however, when we're going through these coaching movements, it doesn't have to be this deep and heavy. It can be really playful. It can be playful because you're honoring your inner child, and you can just kind of, the globetrotter idea in kind of instills the idea of playfulness. And so if we don't take it from a heavy stance, having an awareness is great, but carrying that burden is what I intend on alleviating.
What advice would you like to share with new generations that feel struggling between those different belongings and maybe also different part of their identities, and want to reconnect to
Mm.
themselves and be in peace actually with the different parts of themselves and their roots as well?
My biggest advice would be that peace already exists. And so we live in a place of extreme movements, is what I notice. There's a movement for everything, and which is great. I'm all for activism because that's where change takes place. However, being aware that all of the things that you think you don't have already exist. Peace already exists. You're just taking that USB cable and you're connecting to that. And that comes from an awareness of self. So anytime there is crisis, looking in deeper towards ourselves gives us better insight on how we can handle things. So a little bit of self-centered tuning really helps on this front, because we're trying to people please is what it is. We want to please our parents, we want to please our relatives, we want to please people across the globe, across different time zones. No? So that has to shift to like honoring your truth, because in knowing what you want to do and achieve, what you really want to authentically create in this world will give you the inner peace that you already have. You're just actually dropping the lies of, I need this, I want this, I need this, I want this. All you need is yourself, because the more authentic you are, the more you create and trailblaze through it, because it's already you. As children, being in a park, nobody ever tells a child, and now you should try the slide, and now you should try the swing. Maybe now you should go for a run around the park. Children just instinctively, intuitively know what they want. And that is why I love inner child work, is when we start honoring our truths and we really start connecting to ourselves, we drop a lot of the conversation that is in our mind from social tuning, from our cultural tuning, even our educational tuning is a lot about conforming. And when we drop the act, so to speak, and we actually get playful, so not acting in a play, but becoming the play, is what is honoring your authentic truth. And that's what actors do, right? Like when you watch a movie or you watch a theatrical production, is you are wowed by the actor that becomes the play. You are not
Mm.
wowed by the actor that is playing a role and just feels like, one day the acting is one way, the other day it's not up to par. You're wowed by the character that is just like, whoa, he or she became that character. And that's, I think, where the aspiration lays, is the more authentic you are in your journey, the more you'll wow people. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is, because that goes into the people pleasing again, is to wow people. The expectation is, are you wowing yourself
Mhm.
on a daily basis? That's the reconnection, right?
It is. It is. Be wowing. I like it. And one of the way also to be wowing is through Metamorphic, which is the name of your organization. As I said previously, you are a holistic coach, you are an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur as you build your organization. How did you come to actually create Metamorphic? And what does it mean, Metamorphic?
Thank you for that. I would love to share this actually. So I went from being in the corporate world to becoming a full-time mom. And as I did that, my intention was to honor the path that I was on in that moment. And that was a very different model than what my mom had done. So I created a beauty studio that, once my kids were a little older, I created a beauty studio because I wanted to honor moms that felt like self-care was not part of their routines, and, disconnected to connecting with themselves, and an opportunity where everything is on the side and they're just in their space. And while that was fantastic, and I absolutely love that space, because, any kind of self-care routine, be it beauty, be it just, makeup or essential oils, skincare, whatever that looks like, being in a sauna, swimming, working out, whatever that looks like for everybody is different. What I needed, my next movement was, how do I take this deeper? Because it's great that we take out time for some kind of self-care, but that's physical self-care. How do we take it deeper into an expansion of our minds? And when our minds grow, our practice grows, right? And it kind of feeds off each other. Your practice feeds your mind, and your mind feeds your practice. That gave birth to the idea that we need to honor ourselves, but also, how do we honor ourselves in a way that collectively then contributes? And meta, METTA, meta, is a Sanskrit word that recognizes the collective. And that is a very interesting conversation for me. And that's why I keep it in my coaching world is it kind of goes hand in hand with the immigrant journey. It goes hand in hand with parenting because I am developing entrepreneurs that are soulful, leaders that are heart centric, mentorship and nurturers, be it in parenting roles or workspaces, people driven by their soul identity, not just by like what have you achieved and where you go, not just that. That's, to me, that is, achievements are fantastic, but if it's not heart centric, if it's not soul centric, you're losing the different flavors that become you. And that's where you have the most to offer. So metamorphic is a spin on words to metamorphosize, like caterpillar to a butterfly. But the depth is, how do we do that individually and collectively? So kind of like, there's an African proverb that actually suggests that if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And
Mm.
that really resonates with me is, we can do things quickly, but then at the end of that, we kind of feel like, where was the flavor? I didn't stop to smell the roses. But when we move collectively, and that is not to say then to people please, that is to say that you add value to the community, you add value to your household, you add value to your workspaces. That is the collective space of evolution and transformation.
And for people who would like to commit themselves in more collective initiatives, because I totally agree with you. I mean, it's hybrid about like self reconnection at the same times, like creating as we're doing here. I've been
Mm-hmm.
discussing about having this episode for a long time to be able also to share with other people and to bring to the collective our contribution. So, how do people who want to engage can do or find the collectives? What advice would you give to them actually?
I think the ownership of your own story is a key component in this. And I often, like, one of the taglines for my business is owning the story of your metamorphosis, right? And what that really does is you realize what matters to you the most, because it's such an individual endeavor for anyone to say, this is what you should do, takes away from their path, from their journey. My advice would be submit to self development, because when you really understand and own your story of your becoming, is when you realize, what are the 5 things that matter to me? And let's start with those 5 things. You don't want to build Rome in a day. It was never built in a day. It won't in the future either. You have to take the time to own your story, get the valuable insights, because that's all it is. The different phases of your life are bringing awareness to you, are there for life lessons, are knocking on your door to say, hello, are you paying attention? And when we don't pay attention, it kind of causes dis-ease in our body. And it actually represents itself in these physical manners that we then call disease. So having that awareness really shifts how we think. And when we shift the way we think, we move towards an action plan that's more authentic to ourselves.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. One last question before we end. You mentioned different reconnections in your journey. On a daily basis, how do you cultivate your connection to yourself?
Okay, yes. So are you talking about my self-care kind of things, or just overall?
I mean, depending on how it resonates with you, just like self-care, just like staying connected, because we're living like in a world that's crazy. Everything is going so quickly. I'm not talking about the emotions,
Yeah.
contagiousness and all stuff. So just how do you do to stay connected? I mean, as much as you can, at least.
Yeah. So I am a fairly ritualistic person. And I find that is one of the things that I really bring into my coaching style is how do you honor rituals in your daily life? So a ritual could be like waking up and reading your life purpose statement, or it could be like an affirmative prayer. It could be meditation. It could be a yoga, a workout. So what mine personally looks like is I daily wake up and read my life purpose statement. And I'm huge on affirmative prayer at night as to that's kind of mind tuning for myself as to what I'm grateful for and what I'm here to give back to this world as I take, because energetically, whatever I take, I feel the responsibility to give it back, whatever that looks like. Right. And while those are my connection to myself, I do meditate. I do yoga about 3, 4 times a week. I have a fitness trainer who is absolutely amazing and he keeps me in shape and connected to my physical body because I used to try to escape my physical body and he's kind of really brought me in. Nutritious food, green juices, these are all things that I have like ritualistically brought in, like, ooh, I'm going to have my green juice. It's time for this. And I actually imagine it nourishing each cell in my body. And like other areas of connection. So this was more connection to my body and myself. On the collective front for me is connecting with my mom on a daily basis. So that's a daily check-in and it really feeds my soul. It's kind of that USB cable that I was talking about to my ancestral real lineage, right? Connecting with my kids, whatever that looks like. Sometimes that looks like cuddling in bed. Sometimes it looks like
Mm.
watching movies, and I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. So it's changing drastically on the teenage front. And speaking of rituals, my husband and I absolutely love connecting over coffee and tea. And so we do that twice a day. And that's when we catch up just what's happened in our day and what we want to do together and planning not just planning our planners, planning on like date nights and what kind of quick getaways we can do, those kind of things. So I feel like bringing rituals back really honors and slows us down to like, okay, the speed is great. We're all running and catching the next train, catching the next bus, hopping into our cars and moving forward, which is fantastic. I'm absolutely action oriented, but bringing rituals back helps us slow down and maintain a pace that is doable on the human speed rather than this digital world that we're in, which I'm
Yeah.
also very, very grateful for. I'm extremely grateful for the digital world, but using it to our advantage, right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Great. We are all immigrants. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Mishka, for being here with us today, sharing parts of your story, your experience, your advice to our listener. Is there a last wisdom lesson you would like to share with us
Oh,
before ending this episode?
I was actually thinking this would be a good time to invite people to check out the new collaborative book that I have coming out. It's called Fairy Tales Retold, a spiritual parody in light of trauma awareness. And so, what I love about this project, and I would love people to explore it during the holidays because it's launching December 15th.
Mhm.
I just imagine people playfully reading this stuff, and because trauma talk and self-development can get deep and heavy, but this is just rewriting those fun stories that we all grew up in with a new lens, and see what comes up for you individually, right? Like, what character would you be, and try to pretend with that suit on. How does it feel like to be this new character that you are now pretending to be? Because we all start in a place of playfulness, and then it starts to get draggy. But let's stay in that place of playfulness and go out and get that on Amazon. And I'll have
Great.
a link to it on my link tree as well. So
Sorry,
I'll
you
get
have
the
a
book.
link? You'll have
Yeah,
where is the link?
I will have that link developed on my link tree in the next week, so that, because we're just launching, in the middle of the launch, so people can just go onto my link tree as well and explore that book.
Perfect. We will put the links to your different platforms, including with the episode. So our listener, you'll have the link on all the documents we provide with the episode, so you can go and discover this book, this collective actually writing about new fairy tales. That's great. So perfect. Thank you, Mishka, for your time, your energy, being with us, your sharing. I'm very grateful on my side and the listener side. So thank you so much, and speak to you soon.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so glad we did this.
So am I. Thanks.
Bye.
What was the value of this episode for you? If you feel a call for this exercise, I invite you to pause this audio and take a time to note what comes to your mind. Thanks for listening to Reconnections Podcast, the show that reconnects entrepreneurship, art, and spirituality. If you want to join our tribe to share your impressions or to support us, I invite you to head over to our website www.reconnectionspodcast.com to check out the different ways we can co-create together and keep on growing this podcast. If you think this episode might benefit someone around you, don't hesitate to talk about it and share it. If you think it's been useful for you in one way or another, don't forget to leave us a rating and review. Thanks again, and I'll see you at the next episode.